Lakeside, it's a cold, snowy morning, and I wanted to bring the Monday 5 to you by video today. I hope you are doing well, keeping well mentally, physically, spiritually in this time of lockdown. I've been thinking about yesterday's message that Mark Gagnon brought, and I was kind of intrigued by his whole idea of self-sacrificing love being the way of Jesus. And probably like you, we didn't all have time to write our questions in, but a day later, we're thinking about it. What does it really mean? And over the last little while, I've been spending time with the Apostle Paul's writing to a church in Corinth, the church in Corinth. He wrote a couple of letters to them. And in the first letter that we have, 1 Corinthians, he was kind of harsh in some of the things that he said. He had troubles in the church to write about, troubles in marriage, people having lawsuits, people having to be thrown out of the church for immorality. And I can well imagine receiving that letter, that first letter, was kind of harsh. And you're like, yeah, I don't even know if we want to be associated with Paul anymore. But Paul goes ahead and writes them a second letter. And that's what I find really intriguing. 2 Corinthians, as Paul comes around and he expresses his love for the church again, and he commends himself to them in a bunch of different ways and kind of says, you're like a tablet of a human heart, not a tablet of stone like we used to have in the old covenant. You're a tablet of the human heart, and I'm writing on that tablet. I do everything for you. And he wanted to commend himself to them. And so in 2 Corinthians chapter, let me see what it is, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, he starts into this long section where he says, I commend myself to you in a bunch of different ways. And he actually lists off 16 different phrases, 16 different ways in which he commends himself to the church at Corinth. And sometimes we think about the metrics of ministry and what it means to be successful and what's important and what you count and all that kind of stuff. And I find that Paul had some pretty different ideas around what was important. So I'm going to just take you through the first 5 of those things and just see if we can get some insights from this. Paul says, I commend myself to you, Corinthians, in great endurance. In other words, he says, I'm willing to go pretty far for you guys. I'm willing to do more. I'm willing to hang in there longer. I'm not going to be an early quitter on the road. I'm going to endure for you. I'm willing to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes. And I find that sometimes in this life, in present day, we're a little short on endurance. We quit real early sometimes, don't we? And Paul goes on to say the second thing, it's a phrase, it's a 3-part phrase. He says, in troubles, hardships, and distresses, I commend myself to you in troubles, hardships, and distresses. It's kind of like, I'm willing to be in trouble for you. I'm willing to put up with hardship. I'm willing to put up with distress. And, have you ever had that idea come across your mind, that thought come across your mind of, I don't think I need this hassle anymore. This relationship, this business partnership, this church, this situation is a hassle to me. Paul says, in troubles, in hardships, and distresses, I commend myself to you in those ways. He goes on to say, in beatings, imprisonments, in riots. Beatings, imprisonments, and riots, that's not kind of a part of our world today, is it? Or at least not part of our life here in Canada very often. I hope it isn't. But I wonder what it would be like to say, I'm willing to submit myself to complete social anarchy for you guys. That's how far I'm willing to go in my love for you. He goes on to say, in hard work, sleepless nights, in hunger. In other words, he says, it's not going to be a minimal effort. It's not going to be that kind of situation where someone says, it's not really my job. But Paul says he's willing to go that far. Hard work, sleepless nights. I know even in my limited experience, and who am I? I'm nothing like the Apostle Paul. But the ministry has sometimes caused me sleepless nights. It's caused me to just say, this is really hard. This is way harder than I thought it was going to be. That's what Paul was saying when he said hard work, sleepless nights, hunger. He says, I'm willing to go that far for you. And then the 5th phrase grouping, he says, in purity, in understanding, in patience, in kindness. Paul kind of lifts the standard He says, I'm willing to go a little bit further. I'm willing to hold myself to a higher standard for you guys. That's how far I'm willing to go. When I think about that, I think self-sacrificing love. Yeah, you have to go further. You have to go longer. You have to go harder than others are willing to go. And that's how you commend yourself in the ministry. That's what it takes. And as we continue down this series, Open, I love that we're talking about what community really takes. I love this idea that it's the most overpromised and under-delivered thing in the Christian church. I can see some truth in that. And Paul says, here's how far I'm willing to go for you. Now let's think about the other side of the coin. What's it like when Paul says that to you? Or what's it like when a friend or relationship says that to you? You're willing to go that far for me? It's amazing, isn't it? And don't you love those kind of relationships when people are that committed to you? And I wonder, what would it be like if we just took another step and another one for others? Wouldn't that be amazing? And isn't that the kind of a mark of a Christian community and a Christian life that just draws you in? You want to be a part of that? I find myself tremendously encouraged, tremendously challenged by that. I find it lifts the standard, raises the bar for me in ways that are often uncomfortable, because there's times where I just want to tap out and say, that's enough. But Paul encourages me to go further, and I hope he does you too. I'm going to take you further in Paul's section there and look at some of the other phrases that he talks about later, but that's enough for today. Have a great day, Lakeside.